Lord, that's our is to just walk in you tonight, Lord, to walk in the Spirit, to walk in the promises, to walk in all that you've given us. And so, God, go before us tonight. Help us to understand your word. We pray, God, that you would give us insight and understanding by your Holy Spirit, that we would understand, that we would get it. And Lord, on a night like tonight where there's not a ton of practical application, we pray that that the meat that is on the bone, you'd help us to chew, and you'd help us to get it, and find just a little bit of application you have for us tonight. But whatever it is, Lord, tonight, that your word would do that work for us, and it would do that work in us. And so fill me with your Spirit, Lord. Help me to speak your word. We love you, Lord. We just want to glorify you tonight. Go before us in Jesus' name. Amen. Why don't we go ahead and have a seat? Can you bring it down a bit? Dude, I need that iPad right here. All right. Okay, we got just a couple announcements. It's kind of funny because we've come to realize that that when we send emails out, is there anybody in here who says, like, I'm good at checking my emails? Is there like maybe 2 or 3? That tracks with about what we've seen. And so the reason I say that is we're going to try something a little different. We're going to try like a texting service now, because most everyone will text. With the app that we have, we can push out notifications, but we can't get responses back. And so we're trying this new service. Some of you might have already gotten a text. If you're like in children's ministry, we kind of started with this a couple weeks ago, going, let's see if anyone will respond back if we send out a text. But it's kind of hard to make group message. Anyway, there's services out there that, again, and most of you guys are like, yeah, welcome to 2010. We're a little behind on things. You might have noticed that we always, and you know what, there's a reason for that, you guys. We try to run this church as lean as possible. We don't want to waste extra money. All the money that is here is God's money. And so we don't want to just waste it if we don't have to waste it, right? And so that's why for years people go, why don't we have an easier check-in for children's ministry? And we're like, we're waiting until we really kind of have to. Anyways, so there's a way for this text thing to work. If you walk out of the sanctuary right after, there's a QR code on the wall. Some of you might already be lost at QR code. If you're not, you can do that real easily. If you don't know what QR code means or how to use it, then see like Tim and Sonia are right back there. They would know how to do it. Jesus and Lisa are right back there. They would know how to do it. You could just see them right after service, and they'll help you with that, with the QR code and sending a text, and then you'll be on the list, right, to get those. Okay, that's one of the things. Calvary Chapel Victorville gave us a call last week. We kind of spent some time praying about it, and we think we're going to go ahead. They've got some spots for their next Israel trip that they're opening up. So if anyone would be interested in going to Israel with them, it'll be in January of 2025. So that's a little bit of time. It is an all-inclusive. The price they're charging is all-inclusive. So that includes the bus ride from the high desert to LAX, all the gratuity while you're there, and then the bus ride back up here. So now they've opened up 10 spots for us. So if you've been interested in those 10 spots, come let me know, and we'll get you going. My battery's dying, isn't it? Darn it. Well, good thing it happened now, not when we actually started. Hold on. Okay, how's that? This doesn't happen to Pastor Zeke because like every 6 weeks he changes his batteries. I never change my batteries. I just wait till this happens, and then I just want to, like we talked about, wasting God's money. I don't want to throw out a battery before I know it's dead. Anyways, right when I got to the good part, the price of the trip, I'm going to tell you, I think this is one of the more affordable prices I've heard. It's going to be $3,730. So that's pretty real. I mean, I've seen some trips be like $6,000. So it's a pretty good price. So pray about that. If you'd be interested in that, come let us know. And then the last thing, the Mexico missions trip. If you're interested, we're having the interest meeting after church on Sunday. So after church Sunday, we'll give everyone the information. We'll meet in the back. And I think I joked around that we'd have like chips and salsa or something for that trip. So for that meeting. Anyway, tonight we get into the book of Leviticus. Again, we continue through it. Last week was one of the more sobering chapters that we've studied with Nadab and Abihu and the deal with the strange fire before the Lord, how the Lord is to be approached in reverence and that he is a holy God. We've covered the different offerings, the dedication of the priest, the beginning of that new ministry. Now we get into the home stretch of the first part of the book of Leviticus. We said the book of Leviticus divided into two parts, both worship and walking. And so we finish off that worship period, chapter 11 through 16. It deals with purification, how to remain clean, that God's people are to be a clean people. The priests are addressed, the people are addressed on these areas of life, what's holy, and how the people would live as holy people in an unholy world. We'll see everything from diet, disease, the handling of dead bodies, sexual purity, hygiene, and idolatry over the next few weeks here. So before we get all the way into it, memory verse, if we could, Leviticus 11, dyslexic, 17:11, not 11:17. Leviticus 17:11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I've given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. So let's repeat, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Leviticus 17:11. Okay, one more time. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Leviticus 17:11. Okay, so tonight, we won't have anyone say it tonight for time. Tonight's chapter 11, is very long, and I want to try to get through chapter 12 as well. So we'll see if we can do that. Again, tonight we're going to look at permitted foods. We're looking at unclean animals and the purification process for women after child birth. Now, a few interesting things. In the light of modern medicine, we do see the wisdom of God displayed in preventing all kinds of disease. We talked about a book, None of These Diseases, I believe it's called, that speaks of this stuff. But things that would not have been naturally understood at the time, and we see now the safety in God's law. And we remember that one of the things that the priest's job was to do, and we saw this last week, part of their job was to distinguish between unclean and clean. This is why they had to have a sober mind. So it's important to have this kind of relationship and this revelation from God on the subject of ceremonial uncleanness in relation to diet, chapter 11, in relation to disease in chapters 13 and 14, and other forms of physical uncleanness, chapters 12 and chapters 15. And because these chapters relate to matters involving such responsibilities of the priest, they're given both to Moses and to Aaron. We're going to see that. Also, it is interesting that you'd be hard-pressed to find any of the things that God commanded all these years ago that would be considered medically suspect today. You know, there's a lot of ways that we can say, how can we trust the Bible? and tonight's not the time to get into the study of all those things of why we can trust the Bible, but this is certainly one of those things. It's just one of those things in a great many things that would say we can trust the Word of God, that something that's written all these years ago still stands up today, that it's not anything that's suspect. But it is not just the health law, and that's not the main reason that it's given. Health would be a byproduct of it, but really God is giving this so that these people would be different from the rest of the people of the world. They would be a holy people who are obedient to their God. Where does it leave us today? Do we have to follow this law? Tom, can we go down just a hair more? I don't know if it moved, or I don't know if I'm getting louder, but I'm hearing myself louder. So, okay, sorry about that, guys. So as Christians, we are not directly under these dietary restrictions of the law. I'm going to give you just a few places, and then we're going to hit these again at the end. In Colossians chapter 2, it speaks of being dead in trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, having wiped out the handwriting of requirement that was against us, which is contrary to us. And it talks about how it's taken out of the way. That's been nailed to the cross. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, he talks about food received with thanksgiving, that every animal is good. Nothing's to be refused if it's received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God in prayer. In Mark chapter 7, Jesus says to them, "Are you without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatever enters a man from the outside cannot defile him? Because it does not enter the heart, but his stomach, it's eliminated, and it purifies all foods." Thus he says, and he says, what comes out of a man, that is what defiles a man. And so we see the religious leaders obviously took this stuff, these dietary laws, and they made it a means of self-righteousness. And they lost touch with the fact that these laws were to show a constant reminder to be a holy people in every area of life. As Christians, we need to have a care for holiness, but it's not the diet, or it's not the don't touch, or it's okay to touch certain things. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31, "Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." So whatever we do, we want to bring God glory. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, "You were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." And so we want to kind of keep that in mind. Let's read verses 1 through 8. "Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, 'Speak to the children of Israel, saying, these are the animals which you may eat among the animals that are on the earth. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have cloven hooves. The camel, because it chews the cud, but it doesn't have cloven hooves, it's unclean to you. The rock hyrax, because it chews the cud, but it does not have cloven hooves, it is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud, but it does not have cloven hooves, it is unclean to you. The swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, their carcass you shall not touch, they are unclean to you." So, over the next 5 chapters, we're dealing with ceremonial impurity and separation from impurity. Notice he speaks both to Moses and to Aaron. Moses in charge, some would say, of like the government, because he's the leader of the nation, but then also to Aaron as the high priest, kind of on the spiritual side of the house there. So this is not the first we hear of clean and unclean animals. Ron brought this up just earlier, that with Noah. Do you remember this? In Genesis 7 and also in Genesis chapter 8, there was a distinction between clean and unclean animals. And this is probably, well, it was for the purpose of sacrifice. Still, there's an early basis for these laws that God gave to the children of Israel. Do you remember that? And this is the part that the children's Bibles get wrong. Okay? So you be careful when you read those kids' Bibles to your kids. Sometimes you got to add some added layers of detail in there. And because it's like, oh, it's just all 2 by 2. No, it wasn't. There was some that were more than 2 by 2, and those were the clean animals. So make sure to go home, check those Bibles, and add a note if you need to on the children's Bible. Okay, so like we said earlier, the reasons aren't just hygienic. There's a few reasons we see these laws as we get into them about what to eat, what not to eat, what's clean, what's unclean. This would be an opportunity for these people to demonstrate their obedience to God. This is going to be one of the ways that they would either be able to obey or disobey God by him giving them these things to do. It would also separate them, separate the children of Israel from the Gentiles and their pagan neighbors. They're going to be, they're only supposed to be a nomadic people for a short period of time. We haven't seen the other part yet, but that'll happen. They're going to be there for a while. So people would see that they're different. They're in the wilderness. But then when they get into the promised land, they need to look different from their neighbors. They need to look different from the people they are dispossessing from that land. And God is going to tell them, he's going to go to great length in these next few chapters to say, this is what's happening in that land. Do not be that. Do not do that. Do not look like these people. And so they're going to look different. They're going to be different. And then last, to protect their health. There are a lot of things that we will see here that will protect their health. By following these rules and protecting the health of the Jewish nation through dietary laws, God ensured the continuation and the prosperity of his people throughout history, which would be very important if the Messiah needs to come. Right through this line, we can't have a whole people group dying off because they don't know how to eat what they shouldn't eat. So, starting with the common animals, verses 1 through 8, the mammals on the land, he says that divides the hoof, has cloven hooves here, and chews the cud. That's what you can eat. Right? So like the grass type stuff that just chews on that's who can be eaten. So we're not looking at single hoofed animals. So like a horse, right, has that single hoof. So that would be unclean. He's talking about something with a split hoof there. So he gives a list of what not to eat. He says, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud or those who have the cloven hooves. So here, many animals are mentioned that fit one requirement, but they don't fit the second requirement. So that's what he's saying here with the bow. So he says the camel, the rock hyrax, and the hare, they all chew the cud, but they do not have divided hooves. Instead, they have paws, so they are considered unclean. They're not to be eaten. Now then he gets down at the end to the swine. The swine has a divided hoof. Oh, okay, that one looks good, but it doesn't chew the cud. So it's considered non-kosher. Now, they might not have known this back in their day, but we know about pigs, don't we, today? I'm not saying you can't eat pork. I'm not going to be the guy that says that. But we do know that the pig is grosser than the other animals, right? It rolls around. It will eat anything. Okay, and a guy named Harrison says, it is now known that the pig is the intermediate host for several parasitic organisms, some of which can result in tapeworm infestation. One of these worms, and I can't pronounce the name, Taenia solium, grows to about 2.5 meters in length and is found in poorly cooked pork. So, these animals are unclean. They're not to be eaten, but if you caught at the end, he says their carcass is not to be touched either. Why? Because then you're going to bring that, whatever you touch, to wherever you're going. And so he's just saying certain animals, they're unclean to you. Don't eat them. Right? Don't go looking for them to eat them. Don't find them and eat them. Like just leave these ones alone. There's certain things you can't. There are plenty of animals that fit within this description that they can kill and eat. And there will be plenty of them there. In Deuteronomy, when we get there, might be a while, but when we do get there, we'll get a list of some more that are okay to eat. Here it mainly gives us the ones that are not okay to eat. Verses 9 through 12, these are the ones from like water creatures. Verse 9, these you may eat of all that are in the water, whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. But all in the seas or in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, all that move in the water, or any living thing which is in the water, they're an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. That's pretty serious, right? He's saying this is what you're not going to have. This is what you're not going to touch. But did you catch what it was? What makes it okay? There's two things: fins and scales. Right, very good. So simple rule there. That's kosher. That could be eaten. There is evidence that the fish without scales was also avoided by the Romans and the ancient Egyptians. These types of fish may have been regarded as scavengers since they roam the bottom of the sea, and so they would become carriers of numerous parasites. So whatever is in the water that has fins and scales, he says, rivers. So with this principle, most fish would be considered clean. Why? Because, I mean, you've seen a fish. It's got scales on it. It's got fins on it. So most fish that we would see go, great. That's perfectly, in bounds there. But there are some fish, like a catfish, that has no scales. The catfish hangs out like, you know where the catfish hangs out. It's gross. Shellfish also would be considered unclean, because clams, crabs, oysters, lobster, all they don't have fins or scales, and they so they wouldn't be able to eat these things. We know that these are all bottom feeders, right? They eat waste. Like by and large, these things eat waste, and we know this now, that when cooked properly and at a certain temperature, we know that certain things die off. Right? And that's why some of us use a food thermometer, because we know like at this temperature, this dies, right? So, but there's certain things that you're taking a pretty big chance, and these guys would be taking a pretty big chance. And they're like, I think that's 120 degrees, but I don't know yet. They would have no way. Anyways, so he just goes, these are unclean to you. Don't eat them. So the shellfish are out. Okay? If not cooked properly, it's going to do some damage. Verses 13 through 19. He says, we're talking about birds and flying things here. These you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They're an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, the falcon, after its kind, every raven, after its kind, the ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, and the hawk, after its kind, the little owl, the fisher owl, the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, the Currian vulture, the stork, the heron after its kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. I was going to make a joke about bats and wet markets, but I won't tonight. So there's no rule that we see here given to determine if a bird was clean or unclean. Instead, we get specific birds. There's 20 in the list right here that we saw as they're mentioned that they're unclean and so forbidden from eating. The most common thread through most of the birds is that they're either predators or they're scavengers. And so these birds are considered unclean. And we can see why. If they're scavengers, you think of just the crows on Phelan Road that eat all the roadkill on Phelan Road. They're drinking the blood. They're eating, whatever they eat, well after it's spoiled. And who knows what goes into that body, and then you go and eat it. Like it's bad news. So we don't want to eat these scavengers because of what they've scavenged, right, is one of the things he's telling. So for them, now again, they might not know exactly this. They just see a bird flying in, but they don't know where that bird just came from. And so if it's a certain type of bird, he goes, just stay away from it. He's telling them, just stay away from it. And so that covers the birds. Verses 20 to 23 covers the insects. All the flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth. These you may eat: the locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, the grasshopper after its kind, but all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. So the insects, as much as the Lion King, if you watched The Lion King, would tell you that it's okay. Hakuna Matata, you're probably thinking, with the Timon and Pumbaa teach, Simba how to eat bugs. And I don't know if you watch the news, but the direction of the world today would tell us we should eat more bugs. God gives these guys a list of what's clean and not clean. He says all the flying insects that creep on all fours, that's an abomination. So any creeping insect was considered unclean, like ants or grubs. Yet if it's a flying insect with legs jointed above the feet, these could be eaten. So we see that example he gives of the locust, the cricket, and the grasshopper. And I'm not saying I want to eat those, but he's saying that those would be the ones that would be okay to eat. You can imagine with bugs or insects, they crawl everywhere, right? And they're in, again, gross places. They don't like go and go, oh, I should stay away from that. Let me crawl around it. They usually just go over it or through it. And so, there's things, we don't have to go too much into it, but they can't be washed up. They can't be parceled out. You can't just all eat this part of the insect. It's a pretty small thing. So it's just like, it's out. It's just out. Okay, but the locust, he says, can be eaten, and we do have record of this, right? Matthew chapter 3 tells us about John the Baptist, that he ate, do you remember, what was it? Locusts and wild honey. Yeah, he ate the locusts and the honey. Also, present day, there was someone named Dr. Shaw in Barbary. He ate them fried and salted, tells us they tasted very like crayfish. But the crayfish is also an unclean animal, so I don't know how he learned that. But he does say this, and there's a little spot right here where some people go, wait a second, there's a problem in the Bible right here, because he says creeping on all fours, and we know that, insects and these guys have 6 legs or more. And so the phrase can hardly, a guy named Harrison says, the phrase can hardly describe insects as having 4 legs, since insects as a class normally have 6 legs. The reference is evidently to their movements, which resemble the creeping or running of a 4-footed animal. And someone else says the expression was probably used in a non-literal sense, meaning to crawl, and was used of any kind of creature that has more than just 2 legs and walks upright. That's what they're talking about there. So it's not one of those gotcha moments of the Bible where now we can disobey the whole of Scripture because we found one mistake, right? So kind of understand it's not really literal in that sense. He's just talking about ones that are down walking that way. Verse 24 to verse 28, he's going to talk about carcasses. By these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries part of the carcass or any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. The carcass of any animal which divides the foot, but is not cloven, hoofed, or does not chew the cud is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean. And whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals that go on all fours, these are unclean to you. Whoever touches any such carcass shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries any such carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It is unclean to you. So unclean animals, when they were dead, could not just be left in the community to rot. They had to be disposed of. But the people who disposed of them, of the unclean animal, had to deal with their uncleanness by washing and having a brief quarantine. And he says until evening is when that would happen. So whoever carries any of the carcass, he says, shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Now this does show that ceremonial uncleanness is not the same as being in a state of sin. No sacrifice was required to remedy the condition of ceremonial uncleanness, at least right here. We'll get into something else in the next chapter. But it was a state of ceremonial impurity that needed to be addressed. One little thing about unclean till evening, we know this about the Jews, that their day begins at sunset, at evening, right? That's the start of their next day. So they would really just kind of go home, shower, and be able to go to bed, right? So the idea is being unclean till evening. If throughout the day they're touching these things, when they come home, They go, you can't just like get to it. Like, don't just go crawl right into your bed after you just disposed of this animal. What you need to do is go, he says, wash in water, clean yourself up, and then you can go. Because you imagine, dad comes home from a hard day of work of getting rid of all the animals in the camp or whatever. When he comes back, he should clean up before he sits at the dinner table with everybody or before he gets in bed and makes things dirtier. Now this meant that if a dead, like say rat was found, right, in an Israelite village, it'd be carefully and promptly disposed of, and the one disposing of it would wash afterwards. This practice would help prevent disease in a significant way, and many different commentators point out that when the bubonic plague or the Black Death killed 1/4 of Europe's population in the 1300s, many Jewish communities were largely spared because they followed these hygienic regulations. Now, sadly, because they did that, they were blamed for some of it because they were the ones that stayed alive. Verses 29 through 38, he says, these also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep on the earth, the mole, the mouse, the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sand lizard, the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it's an item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is in which any work is done, it must be put in water. It shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessels into which any of them falls you shall break, and whatever is in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel, any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that may be drunk from it becomes unclean, and everything on which a part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean, whether it's an oven or a cooking stove, it shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern in which there is plenty of water shall be clean, but whoever touches any such carcass becomes unclean, and if any part of any such carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it remains clean. And verse 38, but if water is put on a seed, and if any part of any such carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. Okay, so in those first two verses, verses 29 and 30, he says the mole, the mouse, and this brief grouping of animals that are creeping things that creep on the earth include mammals such as the mole and the mouse. They're excluded based on the requirements of verses 1 through 8, but they are just repeated here for clarity. The large lizard after its kind, the gecko, these reptiles also could not be eaten. Now, when he gets to verses 31 through 38, he kind of talks about like in the house. Right? Did you kind of catch that? So it's like, okay, if it falls on, wood, or if it falls on the skin, or if it falls on I lost it right here, wood, clothing, skin, or if it's in the bag where they would carry this stuff. He goes, that's got to be put in water. It's got to be clean. But if it's an earthen vessel, it has to be broken, just broken. It has to be something porous. So from a hygienic standpoint, these laws are very important. They required, for example, that if a rodent crawled inside a bowl, the bowl had to be broken. Therefore, any disease the rodent carried, like a plague, could not be passed on to the one who would use the bowl. When he talks about putting things in water and washing them, the item of wood, clothing, skin, or sack could be cleansed with washing of water, but the clay vessel had to be destroyed because contaminated food and drink had to be thrown out. Cooking tools were unclean if contaminated with dead, unclean animals. So this would give these people a reason to prevent pests and creeping things from coming into the house. Otherwise, they're going to have to be destroying quite a bit of stuff, right? And so now it's not just, hey, if this happens, then this happens, and if this happens, this happens. This would be like, hey, like pick up stuff. Like we don't want stuff along the walls, like pick it up, clean it up so that we don't have stuff because, you can imagine mom with the kids, right? Like keep your room clean because I don't want to have to break any more bowls here. right? Like I don't want to have to keep buying bowls so it would cause them to want to just be in a state of keeping things clean and preserving what they had. You don't want to have to break stuff or throw out a lot of food. And so these laws promote a general state of cleanliness inside the Israelite home, and this helped with their health and welfare. So I guess it could be said, even though it's not directly in the Bible, everyone knows what I'm going to say right now, is that cleanliness is close to godliness. And so, of course, we say that as a joke, but there really is a little bit of truth to it. At least it's close to holiness. And it did come, the quote is attributed to John Wesley, the co-founder of the Methodist movement. So no doubt that probably came from his mother, who was pretty direct with them and pretty strong with them. Okay, verses 39 and 40, it says, if any animal which you eat dies, he who touched its carcass shall be unclean until evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. He also who carries its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. So if any animal that you eat, so this would apply to the clean animals even. And we're not talking about when you butcher an animal so that you can eat it. That's not what he's talking about here. So it really seems that like if you kind of stumble upon these animals, or you see these animals that have died. If you see an animal that has died, you don't know why it died. Like, did it die because, someone killed it, or did it die of something else? So he's saying, let's just treat it like there's a problem. So even if it's a clean animal, but there it is lying dead, he says now we're going to follow the same rules of getting it out, getting it away, because we don't know what might have killed it. And so again, this isn't for the priest who kills animals on a regular basis, but those who handled the carcasses were ceremonially unclean, and they needed to be washed or cleansed by washing, and then the brief quarantine again. 41 through 43, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet among all creeping things that creep on the earth, these you shall not eat. They're an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creeps, nor shall you make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. Many of these animals were already considered in verses 29 and 30, but they're, we just have more repetition, clarity, emphasis, and those kinds of things. When he says you shall not make yourselves abominable with them, it's considered highly sinful, even idolatrous, to eat these forbidden creeping things. In the Old Testament, the idea of an abomination is often linked to idolatry, and so maybe it just could be, that there may have been some things within the culture or the things that they would see when they get into the land of Canaan associated with creeping things being worshipped. Could be that, since it talks about abomination, which is associated to idolatry. Verses 44 to 47, for I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore consecrate yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any of the creeping things that creeps on the earth. This should sound familiar. For I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the animals and birds and living creatures that moves, and the living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. He says, you shall therefore consecrate yourselves. One great purpose of the dietary laws of Israel was to consecrate these people, was to sanctify them or set them apart from the Gentile nations. It made fellowship with those who did not serve God far more difficult. God wanted to preserve these people for himself. So many times, right? Doesn't he say, we'll get this later. When you get to these pagan nations, when you get to these Gentile nations, don't be giving your sons to their daughters, and don't take their daughters for your sons, right? Don't give your daughters to their sons, don't take their daughters for your sons. Well, this would help a lot, wouldn't it? If you couldn't sit and eat with, they're eating unclean stuff, I can't even be over there, I'm not going to eat that stuff. Okay, so that's going to help with that. And he says this, for I am the Lord. God claims the right to speak into every area of their life, including what they eat. And he had the right to tell them that. Why? Because he was their deliverer, right? He was their redeemer. We do see this, don't we, in the book of Daniel? That Daniel and his friends, when they're in Babylon, they will not eat what the king serves them. They would not defile themselves, it says, with the king's delicacies. And God honors it. God blesses them for it. When he says, neither shall you defile yourselves, not only did unclean animals defile the children of Israel spiritually, but we do see again the hygienic defilement that is there. Israel was spared many of the diseases and plagues because of their diet. Most of the animals that we see that are unclean fall into one of a few of these categories, either predators, so they're unclean because they ate both the flesh and the blood of animals, or scavengers, unclean because they could be carriers of disease and they were constantly in contact with dead bodies, or potentially poisonous and dangerous foods like shellfish and the like. So eliminating these from the diet promoted good health. In general, though, it could be said that the laws protected Israel from a bad diet, dangerous vermin, and communicable diseases. Harris says that. And then again, the memory verse from a few weeks ago, verse 45, he says, I'm the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. God had a claim to the obedience of the people of Israel because he was their redeemer. He's their God. He freed them from 400 years of slavery. Israel was obligated to God because he was their creator and their redeemer. And so some of the verses we looked at right at the beginning, and kind of tying together, like, okay, so we know now that this was good for them. So what should our relationship be to this? Because we know we're not under the law, right? We're not under the law. But are these still a good idea? Sure. But do we have to live to that? No, not necessarily. So some Christians believe that we're under obligation to observe these dietary laws of clean and unclean, but we don't see this to be true. First, these laws were specifically given to the children of Israel. He says that in verse 2. Second, this issue was settled at the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15, where it was determined that obedience to the law of Moses was not required of the followers of Jesus. So, as Paul wrote in Colossians 2:16, so let no one judge you in food or drink. Paul also explained that for Christians there's a danger in legalistically declaring some foods forbidden for others. And so in 1 Timothy 4, and verses 1 and then verses 3 through 5, he says, now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For every creature of God is good. Nothing is to be refused if it's received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. And so Christians, they really are free to eat or not eat whatever they please. And no one should think themselves more right with God because they eat or don't eat certain things. Romans 14, verse 14 says, I know and I'm convinced by the Lord Jesus there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him who considers it to be unclean, to him it is unclean. And I like Morgan makes this quote, if today we are not to be governed by the actual rules of the Hebrew law, the principle involved in it finds expression in the words of Paul from 1 Corinthians 10, whatever therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all for the glory of God. That's the main thing, right? That we would do all for the glory of God. So if you are okay eating pork, I'd say cook it good, right? But it's okay, right? He told Peter to rise, kill, and eat. Okay, I think we have just enough time to get through chapter 12. Let's read through all of chapter 12. and then we'll come back and talk about it. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall then continue in the blood of her purification 33 days. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity. She shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. Verse 6, when the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then she shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who was born law for her who has born a male or a female. Verse 8, and if she's not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. One is a burnt offering, the other is a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she will be clean. Okay. So after giving birth to a male child, we see here verses 1 through 4, the mother was considered ceremonially unclean for 7 days, and the boy was circumcised on the 8th day. If you remember, Jesus was brought to the temple on the 8th day. We see that in Luke chapter 2, to be circumcised. So Jesus fulfilled the law in every aspect, including even his circumcision on the 8th day. So who doesn't enjoy some good teaching on circumcision? Here's a few things. I always love, though, being in the big church to teach this. Whenever we talked about circumcision when I was a youth pastor, this was always a little more of a difficult topic, but we're all adults in here, so we can talk about circumcision. On the 8th day, he says that the flesh of the foreskin needs to be circumcised. We remember back from Genesis that God commanded Abraham and his male descendants, covenant descendants, through Isaac and Jacob, that they should be circumcised when 8 days old. This was a sign of the covenant God made with Abraham and his descendants. And here is also commanded as an aspect of the law of Moses. Circumcision was not unknown to the ancient world. It was a ritual practice among various peoples, yet for the Israelite, circumcision was to every man a constant and evident sign of the covenant into which he had entered with God, and of the moral obligations under which he was under. There is undoubtedly, right, some hygienic reasons for circumcision here, especially making sense in the ancient world. And again, to quote from that book, None of These Diseases, it noted that studies in 1949 and 1954 that showed a remarkably low rate of cervical cancer for Jewish women because they mostly have husbands who are circumcised. But more importantly, the spiritual reasons, right? Circumcision is the cutting away of the flesh as an appropriate sign of the covenant for those who should put no trust in the flesh. It's that idea of cutting away the flesh, right? Also because circumcision deals with the organ of procreation, it was a reminder of the special seed of Abraham, which would ultimately bring the Messiah. In Colossians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul connects the idea of circumcision and of Christian baptism. His idea was that that in Jesus we're spiritually circumcised. We're also buried with Jesus in baptism. Paul did not say that baptism is a sign of the covenant Christians receive and live under. So even with these connections made, it's important to note that one was It's important to note that one was genetically born into the covenant described here in Genesis 17. One is not genetically born into the new covenant. One is born into it by God's grace through faith. So it is wrong and harmful to make the analogies that babies were circumcised, so babies should be baptized. So again, this is a commentator that I was reading right there. But the idea is that God asked them to circumcise their kids. There's health reasons for it, but there's also, it's the sign of the covenant that he had with his people. The main thing for us is a circumcision of the heart, that we would cut away the flesh, not live to the flesh, but see that taken away. Now, getting into kind of the nuts and bolts, when it was a son that was born, the mother was her uncleanness lasted an extra 33 days after the 1 week. So that takes us to a total of 40 days of her ceremonial impurity after giving birth to a male child. There's a few reasons for this, but one important reason was to give an Israelite mother an ancient equivalent to a modern day maternity leave. Here, ceremonial uncleanness relieved her. It would relieve the woman of many of her social obligations. Mothers welcomed these days of rest, seclusion, and bonding with a newborn, right? There are working people, right? And there's always work to be done. And for here, it's like, hey, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. You get 40 days to be with the baby. So we'll see in a few chapters, because he talks about, as is like her ritual impurity, about, that the blood during menstruation would make a woman ritually unclean. And so if you've been present during a birth, there's also blood that happens there, right? And then even after, right, it makes sense that there would be a ritual purification period. If you remember also in Luke chapter 2, Mary fulfilled her days of purification. So she waited those 40 days before she did anything. And then there's this command that she shall touch or shall not touch any hallowed thing. So the commanded time of the ceremonial impurity should not be regarded as a negative attitude towards birth or childbearing. That's not what's happening here. God commands childbearing, and that humanity is commanded to be fruitful and multiply in Genesis, that children are regarded as a gift of God in Psalm 127, and in Psalm 128, that a woman who has many children is considered blessed. The key here to understanding this ceremony is to understand the idea of original sin. As wonderful as a new baby is, God wanted it to be remembered that with every birth, another sinner is brought into the world. And it's a symbol, in this symbol picture, the mother is responsible for bringing that new sinner into the world. And so she's unclean for a period of time. Now, okay, then why verse 5, you might think? Did anyone find it even mildly odd or different that verse 5 then says, but if she bears a female child, then she'll be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity, and then she'll continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. For the male, what was it? It was 1 week and 33 days. With the female, it's double. It's 2 weeks and 66 days. So if she bears a female child, then she'll be unclean. So the time period for each phrase was double what was required giving birth to a son. For the birth of a daughter, a woman was unclean 14, and then 66, a mother of a female child received double the ancient equivalent to maternity leave. Now, there's a few things that people think here, but the longer period of ceremonial uncleanness for the birth of a daughter should not be understood as a penalty. Instead, it is linked to the idea stated in the previous verses that the time of impurity is for the symbolic responsibility of bringing a sinner into the world. When giving birth to a female, a mother brings a sinner into the world who will bring yet more sinners into the world. So it's also been suggested that the longer time period in connection with the birth of a girl was because girls are usually smaller at birth, at least in those days they were, and this would allow more time for a mother's focused care and attention for the child as well. Since sons were more prized, the longer time at home for a mother with a newborn would force the family to bond more deeply with the new female child over the more extended period of time. Now, it is kind of funny that kind of depending on what you already think of God will frame how you read or interpret Scripture. If you already have decided that God's a sexist, that God's a misogynist, and that God hates women, right? Then you'll read this and go, I can't believe this. Boy, this is. But when there's things that we don't know about God, we have to go back to the things that we do know about God. We know that God, and again, I think we know now, I don't think there's a lot of argument on the issue. I don't think there is, that God does not value women. We see in the Bible that God does more through the Old and New Testament to elevate the cause of women more than anything else in history. And so to say like God's part of the He-Man Woman Haters Club or whatever, like it just doesn't fit. And so even here, we can go, well, I can't believe he thinks a woman, because she has a female, it's twice as bad or whatever. And I really like how these commentators go, that could actually be a good thing. If she's, more time to bond with the child, more time, whatever. But if it kind of follows the principle of bringing a sinner into the world, because she's going to have to go make an offering after this. She's going to have to go offer an offering to God, and it's what are the two? A sin offering and a burnt offering, right? That there's some kind of sin that happened. Doesn't the psalmist say, I was brought forth in iniquity? He's not talking about, the very nature of how the act happened, but like a new sinner is brought into the world. And so it kind of follows, right? That, okay, well, you have a boy. Obviously, he'll be part of the equation later when a new child is brought into the world. But he's not the one bringing the child into the world. But for a woman to have a female, that female is going to probably bring more sinners into the world. So it kind of makes sense. Okay, we're hurrying. So when the days of her purification are fulfilled, verse 6, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb in the first year, and then also a young pigeon and a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And it shall be, he shall offer it before the Lord, make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who is born a male or female. And if she's not able to bring a lamb, then 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. One is a burnt offering, the other is a sin offering, and the priest will make atonement for her, she'll be clean. So fairly standard sacrifice for atonement. Again, holding the woman symbolically responsible for bringing another sinner into the world. The mother had to bring a lamb in the first year to be the burnt offering, marking the dedication of her and the child to the Lord. The mother also brought the pigeon and the turtle dove as a sin offering for making atonement. The mother's required sacrifice was the same whether it was a boy or a girl. So you could also go, it's pretty equal here. It's not like, well, if you have a girl, just bring a bird. But if it's a boy, bring an ox. It's not that. They're equal. Same thing. Okay. And then in verse 8, we see the allowance for the poor, as we see with many things already, that if she can't bring a lamb, then 2 turtle doves, 2 young pigeons. If you remember, Jesus' family was poor. Right? That's the offering Mary brought for Jesus. And then the priest makes atonement for her, and then the mother is regarded as clean. I don't know about you, but I, at this point, am very thankful to live on this side of the cross. Right? I know that was a long one tonight, guys. Thanks for hanging in. Hopefully some of you either got something or got a good nap tonight, but that was kind of a lot, wasn't it? Thank the Lord that we got through it. Father, we just thank you so much. For who you are. Lord, you call us to be a holy people. We thank you that it's not in the exact same way that you called them to be holy. Lord, help us in whatever we do to do it unto you. Lord, you tell us that whatever is not of faith is sin.